So today we want to talk about the importance of a godly altar. The importance of a godly altar. And the first point that I want to talk about today is, I'm calling it broken fellowship. Broken fellowship. The greatest tragedy of the fall of man in the Garden of Eden was the breaking of the fellowship that God had had with man. That was the greatest tragedy of the Garden of Eden. And so I'm going to read Genesis chapter 3 and verse 8. Genesis chapter 3 and verse 8. And we are going to see how fellowship has been broken. The biggest thing that Satan did to us in the Garden of Eden was to break our fellowship with God. Verse 8 of Genesis chapter 3. Then the man and his wife heard the sound of the Lord God as he was walking in the garden in the cool of the day. What did they do? Did they run to him? Were they happy and say, oh, God is here to fellowship with us again? No. We are told, and they hid from the Lord God among the trees of the garden. They hid from the Lord God among the trees of the garden. So we see Adam and Eve kicked out of the garden of free-flowing fellowship with God. So the first time, right now, man has got no favor with God. Man has sinned and been kicked out of the garden. But the first time that the Bible records that God looks with favor on man again is when Abel sacrificed animals and shed blood. Canaan came and brought fruits. But Abel came and brought a sacrifice of blood. I am sure that they had seen their father Adam sacrificing. But Cain created his own way of fellowship with God. He created his own spiritual principle. We cannot create our own spiritual principle. Many times there are Christians who have created their own type of Christianity. Those are the fruits that we bring to God instead of the animal that causes him to look upon us with favor. Let me read Genesis chapter 4 and verse 4. But Abel brought fat portions from some of the firstborn of his flock. And what are we told? The Lord looked with favor on Abel and his offering. So Abel, through this slaughter of these animals, raised an altar. Abel, in communicating with God, met God's condition, which was raising an altar. And that altar is what caused God to look on him with favor. So we see a principle concerning shed blood in Genesis chapter 4 and verse 10. And this is after Cain kills Abel. And what does God tell Cain in Genesis chapter 4 and verse 10? Listen, your brother's blood cries out to me. Your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. So blood has a voice. The blood that Jesus Christ shed on this altar spoke on the behalf of you and me. Blood has a voice. So we are going to see how from now on, God is trying to teach his children that when you relate to me, when you want to call upon me, you call upon me from the altar. Don't call upon me from outside the altar. The only time when my favor comes upon you is when you're calling to me from an altar.